G'day, mate. A top show, mate. A top show.
Really? Yeah, good.
Mate, I was intrigued, the discussion about the MUA and the CFMEU potentially merging. I've been concerned about trade union activities for about 50 years, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I regard strikes and pickets and work bans and that sort of thing as legalised extortion. Do you have a general thought on that proposition?
I understand that that people hold that view, but I mean, not all strikes are illegal. I mean, lots of strikes are sanctioned.
As I said, legalised extortion.
Yeah, legalised. Sorry, I thought you said illegal. Legalised extortion. Well, isn't it? It's the theory of the workers' collective leveraging the numbers and their voice against the boss. It's been ever thus.
Leverage, extortion, may be used interchangeably.
Well, there've been occasions. I mean, seriously, in our profession, in journalism, for example, I know when I started as a cadet in Newcastle, my chief of staff was also the president of the local branch of the AJA, and when I signed up to become a journalist, I had to sign the AJA papers as well. It was a closed shop.
Right.
And so branch meetings were held in the local pub and all the rest of it. But there was a great time of transition in journalism then. We were moving from typewriters to computers. People were losing their jobs and
were you at the Newcastle Herald?
Newcastle Morning Herald, and mine as advocate as it was in those days.
Mate, it's a little known fact that I spent 20 years living in Newcastle.
Oh, right.
And I actually went to the Newcastle Herald one morning to watch the linotype process and the printing presses and all that.
Terrific, isn't it?
My experience of unions was the Federated Ironworkers Association. I worked at BHP in those days. And
Newcastle?
In Newcastle.
Oh, right.
Two blokes came into my workplace and said, "You in the union, mate?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Are you going to bloody join?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And they said, "Well, you better bloody join or there'll be trouble." So I joined the FIA and reluctantly, and eventually I got married and went overseas and got out of the FIA. But they made it difficult for me to get out as well. Right. They threatened me to get in and then made it difficult for me to get out.
Yeah.
So I've always had a concern about union power, irrespective of whether it is theoretically wielded legally or not.
Yeah, sure.
I regard it as legalised extortion.
You hear those stories too, Bill, I guess in the building industry particularly, in Queensland at the moment, where there's still closed shops. I mean, obviously most aren't now, and union membership's in the low teens possibly?
Indeed.
As a percentage, so... and progressively since the sort of late 80s, the closed shops have opened up, but maybe the building industry and the mines to a degree are the kind of the last areas of protection.
Indeed, mate. You spent some time in Washington recently.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, 4 days.
Did global warming impact on you at that stage?
Well, of course, global warming is not all about heat. It can be about the cold as well. The first day we were there, it was 24 degrees and glorious.
Yes,
the second
blue
day
sky.
was about 6 degrees and teeming with rain.
And you're talking Fahrenheit
this
here,
is
or
weather, of course. No, Celsius.
Oh,
Celsius.
It was how
24 degrees.
Wow.
In February.
Wow.
Yeah, like the Indian summer for one day.
Okay.
And then the next day it went back to tours, about 6 or 7 degrees and dry rain.
Well, we're going to Florida next week, and they even had snow in Florida earlier this year. So, it's been all over the place, and I appreciate that both camps can argue the toss on that.
Yeah.
Now, Barnaby was out because of citizenship. He was voted back in.
Yeah.
He then got turfed out again because of funny business.
Yeah, out of the ministry, but he's still in his seat.
Do you think he's got a show of ever getting back to a position of power?
You never say never. I think it'd be difficult for him, really. I think particularly now you look at Michael McCormack as a new leader, and then Darren Chester behind him. There's a new generation of leaders in the National Party. They're quite different in character to Barnaby Joyce. Barnaby brought a very distinctive characteristic to leadership, right? Yeah. And he's the ultimate retail salesman for policy in country areas. But I mean, you never say never, but I think it'd be a long shot.
Out of all the people in Parliament that I see on TV all the time, I regarded Barnaby as the most down-to-earth person out of all of them.
Sleep, doesn't he?
And
that face, that this sort of roadmap for everything that's going on inside it.
Look, I've never been a fan of Malcolm, and I acknowledge that the economy is not doing too badly for Australia, but I don't see him as a leader's backside. But we'll see how things work out.
Oh, you're a tough marker, Bill, but anyway.
And Newcastle, speaking of dumping, I worked at the steelworks in Newcastle, and of course that steel making closed down in Newcastle years ago.
Mill and sort of phased
that's right.
out.
So I think that this dumping, the idea of dumping, is an issue, and for all Trump's foibles and faults, he has pointed the finger at unfair trading, which has resulted in industrial ghost towns across America.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great series on Netflix I'm watching at the moment, Flint Town. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Oh gosh, just the death of a city, and not just economic decay, but cultural, moral, social decay of a city. It was great back in this heyday of GM there driving the community jobs. The second most affluent community now one of the poorest and the third highest crime rates. It's an abject lesson in social decay.
Mate, absolute pleasure talking with you.